One cool October afternoon in 1975, my fifth-grade teacher announced the date of the school Halloween party and told us that a prize would be given to the student with the most original costume. When I was 10 years old, I felt about Halloween the way most children feel about Christmas. It wasn't the free candy that got me so excited. It was making my own costume. My designs were the result of hours spent searching through bargain basements and thrift stores for distinctive garments at affordable prices. I would never wear a costume that came out of a box, or so I thought. That year, I had racked my brain to think of a unique outfit. The day before the contest found me wandering through a Salvation Army store when a small black suit hanging among the children's clothing caught my eye. It was vintage in style, and yet it appeared brand new. Our teacher had once shown my class a picture of Edgar Allan Poe, and I knew that with some help this suit could transform me into that great tragic poet. I paid and wore it home, where I penciled on a grease paint mustache, a cravat borrowed from my father, a white dress shirt, my black church shoes, and a book of poetry completed the look. The actual prize I won for my costume was a lousy pen and pencil set. It didn't kill the thrill of victory for me, though. Later, the teacher had me read The Telltale Heart to the class with the lights off and a flashlight held to my face. That night, I did most of my trick-or-treating close to home, as my parents had advised, but there was one house blocks away that I couldn't resist visiting. The old Hollister place was a huge vine-covered colonial-style building separated from our neighborhood by a cemetery. Its foreboding appearance and several unfounded stories about the inhabitants had kept the locals at a distance. In my Poe costume, however, I felt helplessly drawn to it. When my bag was sufficiently filled with goodies, I broke from the other candy gatherers to investigate the place for myself. I stood in front of the old house, gripping a flashlight in one hand and a candy-filled pillowcase in the other. I headed up the long walkway to the porch, where I eventually rang the bell. An elderly woman answered the door. She smiled to see me there, but her smile quickly turned to a stony stare, and her eyes widened as she gasped, "Timothy?" "No, ma'am," I answered. "Well, who are you?" "I'm Edgar Allan Poe." Snapping out of her trance, the old woman said, Oh, yes, I can see that. It's awfully cold out here. Would you care to come inside?" I couldn't count how many times my folks had told me never to enter a stranger's house, and I'm sure the rule counted doubly in this case. Still, I followed her inside, sat down on a plush living room couch across from my mysterious hostess. "This is a big house." "Yes," she sighed. "It seems even larger when you rattle around in it all alone." After my husband passed on, my son Derek and his wife Lillian moved in with their son Timothy. She looked over at a portrait across from the fireplace. In the picture, she was sitting with a young boy in her lap. He looked to be about my age, and when the fire flickered brightly, I saw something else we had in common. He was in a black suit identical to the one I was wearing. "He was killed the day that photo was taken," she said quietly. "On the way home from the photographer's, we were in a terrible accident. A truck in front of us jackknifed in the middle of the road. Derek swerved to miss it, and we crashed into a ditch. Lillian and I were safe in the back seat. Derek got away with a few broken ribs, but Timmy's neck snapped on impact. It took half an hour for an emergency crew to arrive and pry us out. The whole time Lillian was staring at her boy's head swiveled back at her, his eyes wide open. He was buried in that black suit, but a few days later Lillian had his coffin dug up. She had Timmy taken out of the black suit and put into a blue one before he was buried again. She said the blue suit seemed more cheerful. Poor Lillian. She lives in a hospital now." My throat had gone dry, but I managed to swallow and speak. "What happened to his things? I mean, his clothes and stuff?" "Oh, everything was given away to some charity, the Salvation Army, I think." I thanked the widow Hollister for her hospitality and said good night. It was late, so I jumped the low wall surrounding the cemetery and took a shortcut to my street. I was moving along quickly when I was struck by a sudden chill. I stopped dead in my tracks and turned on my flashlight, shining the beam of light on the headstones all around me. I had turned full circle when I came to the marker of the grave I was standing on. In memory of Timothy Hollister, 1965 to 1974. I grabbed a handful of candy from my pillowcase and knelt down, placing it on the grass in front of his headstone. "It's Halloween," I whispered. When I walked in our front door, I was greeted by the flash of my father's Instamatic camera. My mother loved the way the picture came out. She still has it in a frame in the hallway of their home. To this day, I have never told my parents that in their most cherished picture of me, I am wearing the clothing of a dead child.